Welcome to New Thought Deep Dive. Each week, we dive into a refresher on New Thought spiritual ideas that leave you thinking. Everything about this podcast, from the intro to the script and the presenters, is generated by AI. For more information, please visit newthoughtnexus.net.
Imagine you've been walking outside in a brutal, like a freezing blizzard, for hours.
Oh, wow. Sounds awful.
Right.
Yeah,
it is.
yeah.
And you are wearing this incredibly heavy, thick winter coat. I mean, it's kept you safe from the elements, sure, but it is just exhausting to wear. It's restricting your movement. It's covered in ice, and it's just really weighing you down. But finally, you reach your front door, you step inside your warm home, and the very first thing you do is take that heavy coat off.
Yeah, obviously. Just drop it by the door.
Exactly. And the thing is, you don't vanish when the coat comes off. You are just, finally warm and completely free to move.
That physical relief, that sudden freedom of movement, is a really brilliant way to picture the core concept we are exploring today. I mean, the coat served its necessary purpose in a harsh environment, but you are not the coat.
Right. You're the person underneath. And that distinction is the entire foundation of week 2 of your class materials, Seeking Beyond, metaphysical perspectives on death, the afterlife, and reincarnation. So welcome to this deep dive. We are taking the groundwork we laid last week, the idea that heaven and hell are, internal states of consciousness rather than physical places on a map. And we are applying it to the ultimate human fear,
which is death.
Right. In this deep dive, we are going to look really closely at what early mystical teachings refer to as the Great Transition. The goal here is to completely shift how you, the listener, view the end of physical life.
Because think about it. If heaven and hell are states of mind, it logically follows that consciousness itself is the primary reality, not the physical world.
Right.
So this shift we are asking you to make today is profound, but it's really necessary. It's about moving away from viewing death as a termination like an absolute hard stop and understanding it purely as a transition.
Okay, let's unpack this. Looking at the materials this week, I was just struck by how counterintuitive that shift actually is for us.
Oh, for sure.
I mean, from the moment we were born, we are conditioned to identify entirely with our physical bodies. When I look in the mirror, I think, well, that's me. But these teachings argue that the physical body is not the person at all. It is literally just a tool.
Yeah, it's a functional interface.
Yeah.
And to understand the mechanics of this, we have to look at the concept of the I am.
That I am.
Okay. In these metaphysical frameworks, the I am is the eternal conscious thinker operating inside the physical body. Think about the nature of your own awareness for a moment. You possess thoughts,
Yeah.
but you are not the thoughts themselves.
Yeah.
You are the invisible observer watching them happen.
Yeah.
You have a physical brain, sure, but the actual tissue of the brain doesn't possess inherent self-awareness.
Wait, really? So if the brain is just organic hardware, where does the actual personality or the awareness sit? Are we saying the brain doesn't generate consciousness at all?
That is exactly the dividing line between the materialist worldview and the mystical one. Materialism assumes the brain secretes consciousness the way a liver secretes bile. Like when the organ shuts down, the consciousness just evaporates.
Ooh,
Gone.
Yeah.
Exactly. But the mystical texts you are studying argue that consciousness is primary. The brain is merely the keyboard. The I am is the unseen musician playing the keys.
Oh, I like that.
Right. The keyboard can break, but the musician remains entirely intact.
That makes the winter coat metaphor from the beginning so much more literal, honestly.
Yeah.
If the I am is an eternal expression of the divine, it possesses those same divine qualities, meaning it is ageless, birthless, and deathless. The physical body is just a temporary garment.
Which is a metaphor echoed across thousands of years of ancient wisdom traditions, by the way.
Yeah, the materials reference that ancient symbol in the Genesis story about the coats of skin. I always read that as a literal clothing reference,
Most people do.
But the class text suggests it represents the temporary physical bodies our spirits have to wear in order to interact with this really dense material world.
Yes. And you find the exact same mechanical truth in the texts of the Bhagavad Gita, too.
Oh, right.
It describes the soul discarding an old, worn-out physical body, just as naturally as a person discards frayed clothes to put on fresh ones. The essence of the wearer is completely untouched.
But, and let's be real for a second, if we strip away the philosophy and look at how we actually behave, it is so obvious why we struggle with this.
Oh, absolutely.
We experience the world purely through the sensory feedback of this physical suit. When the suit gets hurt, we feel pain. When the suit eats, we feel full. We have spent decades confusing the feedback loop of the winter coat with our actual skin.
Yeah, that's exactly it.
So when the coat starts to wear out, we are terrified. We literally think our very existence is unraveling.
That sensory illusion is incredibly powerful. The metaphysical view, the reality of the I am, requires us to understand that life is an unbroken stream of consciousness.
Mm-hmm.
The shedding of the physical garment isn't a tragedy of destruction. It is a functional necessity for the next stage of growth.
Mm-hmm.
You simply outgrow the suit.
Okay, but if the physical body is just a coat we take off, what actually happens in the exact moment the fabric unspools? Because historically, humanity's view of that departure is pretty grim.
Oh, grim, yes.
The materials talk extensively about how 19th century mystical thinkers had to actively fight against some deeply entrenched, terrifying theology.
What's fascinating here is that they really had to dismantle an entire system. We need to understand the historical context of that rigid theology to see why it was so damaging.
Right.
For centuries, institutional frameworks often use the threat of a painful death and the promise of eternal agonizing punishment as a mechanism of control.
It was a socio-political tool, basically. If you can convince someone that a terrifying void or a vengeful judge is waiting for them the second their body fails, well, you can dictate exactly how they live, how they behave, how they contribute to the institution.
You ensure absolute compliance through existential terror. But the 19th century seekers and mystics you're reading about, they began to challenge that dogma. They observed that the universe is governed by harmonious, natural laws.
Like physics and nature.
Right. Water cycles, seasons change, stars form and collapse, and all of it happens without malice or punishment. So they argued that the transition of human consciousness must be governed by those same gentle, natural laws.
Which makes sense.
They use the metaphor of the bursting of a rosebud to describe it.
I love this part, because when a rosebud blooms, the outer green shell breaks apart.
Mm-hmm.
To the shell, it looks like destruction, but to the flower, it is a birth. It is the emergence of the spirit into its true glory.
Beautifully put.
Thanks. But that sounds very poetic, so let's get mechanical for a second. A flower blooming doesn't really explain how human consciousness actually separates from a biological nervous system. How did these texts describe the actual mechanism of departure?
They describe an energetic mechanism often referred to as the silver cord.
The silver cord.
Yeah. In this framework, the subtle body, which is the vehicle of the I am, is tethered to the physical nervous system by an energetic conduit. It acts almost like a data cable, routing the consciousness through the physical brain and organs.
So when physical life reaches its natural conclusion, what happens to that conduit? Does it just snap?
No, it is gently severed. The flow of vitality simply ceases. There is no violent tearing of the soul from the biology.
Oh, okay, that's a relief.
Yeah, the withdrawal of consciousness is described as being incredibly smooth. The best way to conceptualize it is the sensation of waking up from a deep, heavy sleep.
Wow.
The dense, restrictive limitations of the physical senses just fall away, and the subtle senses power up.
It is almost like a software update moving from local hardware up to the cloud.
Yes.
The data isn't destroyed. The connection to the old hardware is just disconnected.
That is a highly accurate, modern way to interpret the texts. The core information, like the personality, the memories, the essence, transfers seamlessly.
I hear that, and structurally it makes sense, and I have to push back here on behalf of anyone listening who has lost someone they love.
Of course.
If this transition is just software uploading to the cloud, if it is as natural as a rosebud blooming, why is human grief so agonizing?
Yeah.
When we experience loss, it doesn't feel like a gentle, harmonious blooming. It feels devastating. Are these teachings implying that our mourning is just a misunderstanding of the mechanics?
That is a crucial question.
Yeah.
And the texts do not dismiss human grief at all.
Okay, good.
The sorrow of separation is completely real to our human senses. We are biological creatures currently wearing the physical suit.
Right.
We miss the sound of a loved one's physical voice, the literal touch of their hand, the space they occupy in a room. That biological and emotional separation is profound, and the grief that follows is a valid reflection of deep human love.
So the teachings acknowledge that the loss of the physical interface really hurts.
Yes, absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
The sadness of temporary separation is real. But what the mystical framework tries to dismantle is the fear of a permanent void.
The fear.
Yes. The belief that the person is extinguished into nothingness. That is the illusion. We grieve because we are temporarily separated from their physical presence, but we do not need to fall into despair. They are not destroyed.
Right.
Following your analogy, the software is intact. It is just operating on a network we cannot currently log into.
That distinction changes the entire landscape of how we deal with mortality.
Yeah.
Because the actual physical event of the transition isn't our true enemy. The real enemy is the fear of the transition.
Exactly. The fear of facing a dark void or the fear of standing before an angry deity. That fear acts as an invisible wall in our daily consciousness.
So what does this all mean for you listening right now?
Good question.
Why are we dedicating an entire week of this class to studying the end of life when you are actively trying to figure out how to live your life today?
Well, because the way you view the end dictates the way you navigate the present. If your underlying operating system believes the universe ends in a terrifying void or a strict courtroom of judgment, you will naturally live a guarded, anxious, defensive life. It is an unconscious psychological burden.
It is exactly like being terrified of the dark.
Right.
If you spend your whole life obsessed with and afraid of the dark, you keep your head down, you stay inside, and you play it entirely safe. You never actually look up to enjoy the stars.
That's a great way to put it.
Dropping the fear means you finally get the stars.
And when you look at the mechanics of the universe, even physical science tells us about the conservation of energy.
Oh, sure. Energy cannot be created or destroyed.
Exactly. It can only change forms. If you apply that universal law to consciousness, recognizing your own eternal nature becomes the ultimate key to psychological freedom.
Wow.
When you grasp that the I am within you cannot be burned, cannot be harmed, and cannot be destroyed by any physical circumstance, you are suddenly freed to live with radical courage.
You stop playing defense. You stop waiting for the other shoe to drop because you realize there is no ultimate shoe.
You realize you are an eternal expression of the divine. Therefore, you can pursue your relationships, your creative joys, and your purpose today with absolute confidence. The heavy, paralyzing weight of existential dread is just removed from the equation.
Okay, so we have established the mechanics of the departure, and we have established that there is no dark void or vengeful punisher waiting for us.
Correct.
But that leaves a massive lingering question from the materials. If there is no external judge, what actually happens on the other side?
Here's where it gets really interesting. This brings us to one of the most mechanically fascinating concepts in early mystical teachings. The life review.
The life review.
Yes. The texts are very clear that the absence of a punishing deity does not mean an absence of accountability. There is absolute clarity, but the accountability comes from within.
Wait, so I am my own judge.
In a way, yes.
How does that work without spiraling into the same guilt or denial we experience here? In this physical life, we have massive defensive walls. If someone points out a flaw, my ego immediately generates excuses, like, I only snapped at you because I was tired, or I only cut that corner because the system is unfair.
Yeah, that is where the mechanics of the transition change everything. During the life review, which happens as the soul enters a resting season, the physical ego is entirely gone.
Gone, really?
Yes. The ego is a survival mechanism generated by the physical brain to protect the biological suit. Once the suit is discarded, the survival drive vanishes. You view your history with what the teachings call the single eye of spirit.
Meaning you are finally capable of total objectivity.
Complete objectivity. You experience a perfect, unfiltered playback of your life. Every thought, every word, every action is witnessed. But more importantly, you feel the direct ripple effects of your actions on others.
Oh, wow. That sounds intense.
It is. But you see exactly where your thoughts aligned with universal love. And you see exactly where you fell into fear or selfishness. And you witness all of this without the crushing weight of human shame.
It is like an athlete sitting down to watch the game tape after a match, but without a coach screaming at them from the sidelines.
Yes, exactly.
You are just watching the footage with complete honesty to see the mechanics of your performance. You see, I dropped my shoulder there, which caused the pass to fail. I need to correct my posture for the next game. It is a purely educational process.
That is an excellent way to frame it because it highlights the core driving purpose of human existence according to these texts. Soul growth.
Soul growth.
Right. If you accept the life review as an educational tool rather than a courtroom trial, it completely shifts your worldview. It implies that life is not a pass or fail test. It is an eternal classroom.
which fundamentally reframes how we view our daily struggles. But if we are in an eternal classroom, what exactly is the curriculum leading us toward?
The texts state, the soul is continuously evolving toward a state called Christ consciousness. And we should clarify for our listeners, in this specific metaphysical context, Christ consciousness isn't strictly referring to a historical religious figure or a specific religious doctrine.
Right, it's more universal.
Exactly. It is a technical term used by early mystics to describe the ultimate, perfect frequency of divine love.
It is the realization of absolute unity with the whole, the state of being where the individual I am is perfectly aligned with the divine mind.
Precisely. And because that evolutionary goal is so vast, it requires an eternal classroom to achieve it. The life review is simply the soul taking objective notes on its progress, assessing what it has mastered, and preparing for the next specific lesson in its spiritual education.
So if the life review is just a mechanism for spiritual education, we don't actually have to wait until we leave this physical body to utilize it.
Not at all.
The material suggests we can actively participate in this process right now. And we want to give you, the listener, a rigorous philosophical practice based on these teachings that you can implement tonight.
The early mystics utilized a practice you could call a mini Sabbath life review. The goal is to accelerate the educational process while you are still in the physical body.
Okay, how does it work?
Before you go to sleep tonight, take 5 minutes to quiet your mind and consciously step out of your physical ego. Gently observe the actions, conversations, and reactions of your day. Watch your own game tape.
But the key here is the lens you use to watch it. As you review your day, ask yourself one specific diagnostic question. Did my underlying thoughts today reflect love, or did they reflect fear?
The discipline of this practice is to observe without judgment. If you notice a moment where you chose fear, where you acted out of selfishness or anger, do not beat yourself up.
Right, no shame.
Exactly. Human shame is a product of the physical ego. Just note the mechanical failure. By bringing conscious, objective awareness to your daily choices, you are actively participating in your own soul growth.
You are taking control of the curriculum. It shifts your perspective from being a passive victim of random circumstances to being the sovereign architect of your own spiritual evolution. You realize that every difficult conversation, every frustration, and every joy is just another opportunity to practice alignment.
And the most comforting mechanical truth of this entire framework is that if you fall short today, well, the eternal classroom opens its doors again tomorrow.
That is so comforting.
It is. The universe operates on a system of infinite compounding growth.
Let's pull all of these concepts together because we have covered a massive amount of metaphysical ground today regarding the Great Transition.
We really have. The primary structural takeaway for you, as a student of these texts, is that death is not a termination.
Right.
The end of the biological interface is not the end of your consciousness.
You are the eternal wearer, not the heavy, worn-out winter coat. You are the I am, the unseen musician playing the keyboard. And when this physical suit has served its purpose, the energetic tether simply disconnects, and you transition seamlessly into the next stage of your journey.
We also explored how the true barrier to human joy is not the transition itself, but the historical, theological fear of it. By recognizing your immortal nature, you dismantle the invisible wall of existential dread, freeing yourself to live with radical courage in the present moment.
And finally, we looked at the mechanics of the afterlife as an active state of soul growth. Through the objective clarity of the life review, completely devoid of the physical ego, your soul continues its rigorous education in an eternal classroom, moving closer and closer to the perfect expression of divine love.
It is a profound philosophical framework governed by laws as natural, reliable, and harmonious as gravity itself.
As we wrap up this deep dive for week 2, we want to leave you with a final thought to mull over as you navigate your daily life. It is a direct application of the concepts we just discussed.
Let's hear it.
Think about this. If you truly accept the premise that you are an eternal being participating in an endless classroom, how does that completely rewrite your definition of wasting time or making a mistake today?
Oh, wow. That changes the entire psychological landscape.
It really does. If you have an eternity to refine your consciousness, maybe the immediate crushing pressure is finally off. Maybe you can stop agonizing over every perceived misstep and actually begin to enjoy the messy process of learning. Maybe you can finally take off that heavy, ice-covered winter coat of fear, step into the warmth of your own undeniable nature, and look up to enjoy the stars.
We hope you take the profound profound piece of that perspective into your week.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Keep questioning, keep observing your game tape, and we will see you back here for week 3.